Mr. Brown, you ready? Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. We are the Planning and Zoning Board for the City of Graham. We're here to conduct the city's business tonight, and we'll give you an opportunity to talk if you would like to talk to us. I'm gonna do a roll call first for just a quorum. Mr. Huffine. Here. Mr. Benesh. Here. Chair Dean Ward's here. Mr. Christmas. Mr. Bice. And absent right now is Mr. Wooten and Mr. Bailey. Mr. Bailey did call and he's going to be unavailable tonight. All right, if everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God. Burp, sneeze, same time.
Everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes that was submitted to us. If so, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve minutes.
The revised edition. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, Cameron, let's move right on into the new business.
Yes, sir. As mentioned in the staff report that y'all have, we received the request for discussion of the proposed overlay district established across the Cherry Lane corridor, including all parcels that are currently accessible from either Cherry Lane, from Jimmy Kerr Road to Trollingwood Road, or those adjacent to Governor Scott Farm Road, extending south down Governor Scott Farm Road from Cherry Lane to Mill Creek, where it crosses under Governor Scott Farm Road, shown as, quote, the zoning atlas of the city of Graham, North Carolina, unquote. The request is to open the discussion back up for the overlay district and determine the next course of action for the item. And Mr. Huffine was one that's presenting this. It's not necessarily a public hearing item, so in that aspect, I'll kind of open the floor up for you all to, talk amongst yourselves and discuss the kind of item that's in front of you. If Mr. Chad wants to provide some points as well, I know he provided me with some additional information than what you have in the packet in regards to the current overlay, but some pictures that he provided as well. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Mr. Brown, I know you, the gentleman sitting behind you, sir, your face is very familiar. Could I ask you your name?
I'm Bill Oakley with Ace Young.
Great.
representing the IT students.
Thank you. And we're here tonight to discuss and just have a formal discussion about a potential overlay. We're not going to act on anything tonight that I know of, but we're just going to talk about it and see what steps we want to take and move forward. Mr. Huffines, I know this is something that you've been working on, and if you would take the opportunity to run through it with us.
Sure. So I guess for background and informational purposes, I think personally the Cherry Lane area has been in consideration for development for quite some time. I know for at least the past 22 years of my life, we've been working in that area. Last November, the city of Graham was selected by Intersect Development out of Georgia to bring some industrial uses to Cherry Lane. And that spawned an incredible interest in the area specific to the neighborhood of Old Fields, and then a few of the smaller residential landowners along Cherry Lane. During that time of discovery, I would imagine 3 months or so, we were all heavily involved, those of us on the board, and at that time, me as a citizen, were involved in the discussion and evaluation of those plans and as they were submitted. And it became apparent during those hearings that there was a significant gap in the Unified Development Ordinance language and its intentions, with the expectation of the developers bringing projects to the area. At that time, it was also brought to light that a 2035 land use plan had been adopted by the city of Graham, which was a surprise to many of the citizens in the area, which were basically invested in the land use according to the 2020 plan. So those two items came together, and during those hearings, we had the opportunity to craft a large heavy industrial ordinance that we were able to submit to the city on February 17th of this year. That submittal, however cumbersome, has been entertained by the city staff and has been reviewed in some capacity, and has, based on what we have been told by city staff, been integrated into a larger look at the land use plan going forward. In June of this year, possibly July 1st, a budget allowance for the look at the land use plan and its revisiting was included in this budget. So in an effort to move this item forward as development continues in the area, we discussed last meeting at Planning Board, what can we do to continue action, or at least spawn some activity at the staff level or possibly at the council level. So I was given the charge to craft a smaller document, something much easier to review, comprehend, and discuss. And so within a week's time, we provided that information to city staff in the form of an email and a draft document that we all have before us tonight. So that document is open for discussion and to just tear it apart, look at it specifically line by line, or ask me specific questions based on my historical knowledge of the area and conversations with all of the neighbors and landowners. And then we can do whatever the board desires with that information. In addition to this document that Cameron has on the screen, I've provided you with about a year's worth of homework in the form of photographic essay items, past reports for reference if you so wish to discuss those. And all of that is in an effort to bring clarification and light to the dissimilar uses that are competing for that area. However important it is to facilitate continued growth, be it residential, industrial, agriculture. We believe, I think as a group, we need to move forward in an effort to close that gap I mentioned earlier, and to give new development interest a definite guidance in what they can do, so that we don't spend 4 months like we did last year in a process that was very difficult, I think, for everyone involved. So with that, I'll yield. And
Is it my understanding that this is a narrow scope, specifically looking at Cherry Lane and properties that adjoin Cherry Lane, or are you wanting to go outside of that scope? And the reason I'm asking that question, because, several years ago, the city and the county entered into the agreement with the state and the commerce part there. And I certainly don't want to infringe or step on the toes of something that's in place with the state and the county, the city of Graham and the city of Mebane. But I just want a little bit more clarification of what we're really targeting there, if we're looking at more than just the properties that border Cherry.
So, Mr. Chair, my understanding of the 2013 compact was creating the commercial district centered around the Governor Scott, Senator Ralph Scott Parkway area. The understanding at the time, and there are those in the room that may be able to correct me or educate me, I certainly am humble for that opportunity. The boundaries in concept were basically Mill Creek to the north, Trollingwood Road to the east, and then Kimry Road was I think the southern boundary, as it is kind of the rear frontage to Lytle and Walmart at the time. So I think during that time, albeit a smaller portion of the overall mega site drafted in the late 90s, I think that area was significantly or was the significant composition of that idea at the time. I do not necessarily believe or understand that there are any formal boundaries, just in concept, of the general area. So as this document is written, the specific overlay, just for the necessity to have a actual boundary, the document reads from the intersection of Trollingwood Road along Cherry Lane back to, I believe, Jimmy Carr. And then its southern boundary is to the intersection of Governor Scott Farm Road, where the culvert exists over Mill Creek. I think staff, in this case, Cameron has done a good job of showing us an illustration. And I brought several with me to look at as well.
I'm not sure I understand your. Please add a little bit more clarity. I didn't understand whether you answered a question of whether it's just the item, the pieces of property touching the road or the other properties in the area.
Okay, so I believe the way it's written currently is
Say
that
what you're proposing.
if the property has frontage along Cherry Lane or Governor Scott Farm Road,
Thank you.
that is the way it's written.
Mill Creek is the little creek down there at the bottom of Governor Scott Road, bottom of the hill.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chrisman, Cameron's got his pointer on it.
Okay.
Basically kind of just this long T area right here at this intersection all the way over, correct? Is that kind of in this vicinity?
That's correct.
Okay.
So are we talking about going all the way down to Highway 54?
That was Jimmy Kerr.
Just stopping at Jimmy Kerr.
Yes, sir.
Cameron, have you got a map there that shows the Commerce Park
Not on me. I may be able to find it while you all talk a little bit
that you
longer.
can
I'll try and pull it
put
up.
it side by side?
Yes, sir. Well,
And
maybe not
also-
side by side, but I'll see if I can find it.
Status of the Unified Development Ordinance. I don't know if we're walking in circles. Thing goes.
I certainly understand that, Mr. Chrisman, and, you know, this is something that was brought before us, 8 months ago. And no traction was ever gained, and, you know, sometimes with, municipality, governmental agencies, is so many people's got irons in the fire and the wheels don't turn very quickly, so I felt like if we would go ahead and start looking at things that we make or propose and move something forward, whether it be an overlay district or going back and changing some permitted table uses or adding some more strict requirements such as setbacks and things like that, that's something we could do pretty quickly. And it's not that I want to move quickly, is I just feel like, you know, 8 months is, we could have walked down there and back 10 times. And sometimes I just want things to move a little faster.
What I just pulled up is the whole scope of it. So you can see outlined in red, you have kind of that boundary area of it showing the ones in yellow are participants, not participants, Walmart sites right here, but I believe this is kind of the development partnership that's a part of it. So you do have, from what I can see here, from what I pulled up, has a couple of these areas along the Cherry Lane corridor that are participants inside and adjacent. So I may need to make sure, just double check. I pulled this off of one of the websites. But this is kind of, after first glance, this is what I'm seeing right here. So I'll do a little bit more digging and just confirm.
Would y'all prefer to proceed section through section by section, or, and we can make notes as we go? Or do you have a different angle that you would like to approach it with?
So in fact, we're looking at an overlay district. It's not on. We've got 2 overlay districts now, if I'm not correct. 87 coming to town and 54 coming into town. Outlier, are we gonna, is that gonna be a standard operating procedure, standard operating practice to have overlay district?
Wish I could answer that question as far as what direction council may go. I really don't know.
Because, I mean, we have the two lots down here on Governor Scott and Cherry Lane. Special permit, we buffered and berms and trees. Crazy on that one.
Mhm.
It was shot down. I don't know what kind of setbacks and what kind of precautions we could take to make it more attractive, both for the landowner and the businesses.
I certainly believe that we need to protect these homeowners that have been living out there for years. And that development of Old Fields has been there for 15 years or more. There's numerous parcels on Cherry Lane that are not a part of the Commerce Park that are residential. There are several parcels that are presently zoned where someone could start immediately with a project out there. Which is, we have no further zoning with them or over them. But we need to do something to protect these developments. And I'm not saying we not develop it, because I certainly believe it should be developed, and I certainly believe it should be some type of industrial. But, if you go back and you start looking at the Walmart project and the Lidl project, you're talking 600 foot off the road. They're 600 foot off the road. And then the last project that was brought before us was less than 100 foot off the road. And that's where I think the issue lies is it's not that we don't want development, because we do. We just want a good, friendly development.
Goes through the process of adding homes to that, right?
Yes, sir.
How many homes?
Mr. Chrisman, I believe there's about 50 pads being prepared right now, in addition to the construction that's already ongoing, prepared lots.
Sprinkle more than 50.
Correct. That PUD is approved for about 700 residential units in a combination of single family and multifamily, in addition to commercial and central amenity.
That is on for residential and commercial, the Old Fields area is.
Yes, sir, correct. There's a PUD, a planned unit development that's on that piece of property that was established in 2004, which is specific to the 211 acres in that area. And it combines a mix of use from single family residential to multifamily in apartments, townhomes, condominiums. It also has room for general business and then the historic amenity there at Governor Scott Farm Road and Cherry Lane.
But the general business like a store or. a
Correct.
market.
Correct. And also to allude to something you mentioned earlier, Mr. Chrisman, the most recent submittal we saw in planning today from Intersect Development. It appears that they were amenable to the conversations that we had back in November, all through up until Christmas time. The most recently submitted plan showed a very respectful 250, 275 foot distance to their area of operations from Cherry Lane. I had about,
The lots between Cherry Lane and Governor Scott to the south.
that's correct. That's the lot that's zoned industrial currently. And I had about 45 seconds to review that site plan before I left the office this evening. And in just an instant quick glance, they've made a very efficient use of that property. They've set the property and its operations back, like I said, a very respectful distance commensurate with residential lots that front Cherry Lane, almost exactly the way Chairman Ward presented it to them in planning back in December before they withdrew the request. So I think there is some fruit that has come through all of this. And it is certainly much more palatable to the Old Fields venue. I spoke with Mr. Bishop this morning. He had an opportunity to review the plan and was very encouraged. That's correct. So we're headed in the right direction. I believe we just need to give everyone some guidance so that we can close this gap and move on.
I remember reading that you were involved with the land swap, the property on, putting, highway Interstate 40.
So my property is adjacent to property that Mr. Brown and his
Which goes
co.
On our diagram of yours.
You have to get Cameron to put that back up.
Yeah, I got you 1 second. So was it this piece right here? Is that the one?
Correct, the long sliver
Yes, sir.
inside that little green line.
So that's just, that green line is basically showing city limits and non-city limits. So there's a little bit more area in between here. It's just those lines are kind of a little close together in that area. But yes, sir, right here.
Okay, that's that's the entirety of your property on Cherry Lane.
Yes, sir, that's correct. Basically the unincluded county property.
Okay.
So the parcel in blue that Cameron has, and then the parcel to the north. I think he'll highlight that for you.
All that.
Yes, sir.
Very poorly highlighted, I must say.
For the overlay districts you're choosing, would that fall upon,
Yes, sir. The idea, Cameron's gonna have to show you some photographs to illustrate it better for you. But the idea is to respect the current boundaries that the PUDs and the residential properties, as well as some of the intersect development properties have along Cherry Lane. It is specific,
mention the intersect properties, I'm not sure which property.
I'm sorry.
It's-
Cameron, if you'll point to the 9 acres at the intersection of Governor Scott Farm Road and Cherry Lane.
So the intersect property is this piece right here. That is the new proposal that we received for review cycle yesterday. So it's on our TRC review cycle. It was sent out today to be reviewed. Use by right, so not really much council planning board action that has to be taken. So it's this area in blue right here. That is the new intersect development property that we just received.
But you said
So Cameron, that is not exactly the correct piece of property.
So-
Adjacent to that are 6 acres and 3 acres, specifically south of Cherry Lane and the Old Fields neighborhood. Just to the east.
Oh, right here, this one?
No, sir. If you'll go back to the property where you had originally highlighted blue. If you'll go north of the parcel you're hovering over, there's a 6-acre rectangle. And to the east of Governor Scott Farm Road is a 3-acre rectangle. It was formerly Mr. Walker's, had that leased for his donkeys.
Gotcha. Sorry, my apologies.
That's okay. So if you'll look on the flash drive, I'll help us fast forward a lot since we were
Yeah,
all
please.
involved in some of the hearings back in November, December.
Which file is it under? Can you see it up here?
If you'll go to 0,
Setback compare streetscape.
so we'll just do them in order.
All right.
If you don't mind. And gentlemen, if you'll entertain this for just a few minutes. I'll try to illustrate for you all right, you just go through those photographs. All right, and then back out of that and go to,
Oh, same one, sorry. So that's the Amazon facility and this is the Lidl at night.
yeah, you can do that overall I'm sorry, go back.
No, you're wrong. Just these
There
down here.
there should be some compare there. Go to the next one. down.
Lights one and setbacks compare.
There you go. So this brings to light, literally, the differences in the ordinance that we currently have's intention and what happens in reality. All three of those properties meet the 1-foot candle at the property line. But there's a significant difference in illumination at the property line and visible light. So what you're looking at in the foreground is the Amazon, followed by Lidl and Walmart. And you see the differences in what the streetscape at 8 feet from the right of way which is what Intersect was doing just by a review of our land development ordinance. They were following exactly what's written. So that retaining wall is approximately 8 feet off the right of way. And at nighttime, it is lit up, all the way out to the street and across the common property lines. If you go back one building further, that's about 700 feet from Senator Ralph Scott Parkway to the area of operations on the northern end of the next warehouse. And then in the rear, you kind of see the similar setback and light level. If you'll go to the next slide, that's just proof of the light at the property line. And then that's what it looks like. So we meet the ordinance with Amazon. They are in conformance with the current UDO requirement. But as you can see, it's broad daylight, and that's midnight in winter from last year. So there's a significant value in closing the gap of what's currently written and what the actual effects are on the ground. You go to the next slide.
Second,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Huff, go back a slide or two. What you propose in this document, what are we looking at would not be allowed?
It would be an area of operations removed from the right of way, a distance greater than 8 feet. The distance to which that ultimately lands is what we're discussing tonight. What you see is 8 feet from the right of way, 700 feet from the right of way, and 400 feet from the right of way as you look into the picture. In this situation, property line to property line, sidelines aren't really a factor because these facilities operate 24 hours a day. And so the mutually beneficial illumination is good for all of them along the sidelines. When you have a house that's adjacent to, say, the glycol cooler there on the corner, it'd be tough to sleep. And that's the condition that we're going to have at Cherry Creek and the currently zoned I-1 property.
Okay, the lighted building is one in the middle. That if they wanted to expand, in this case, west, how far out do they come?
Actually, that's to the north, and they would have,
Anyway, this way, to our left. How far out do they come and still be in control?
I don't know if anyone in this room can answer that question because I do not know their entitlement at the time they were permitted.
Are you
all-
talking about like closer to the road
Sure.
this way?
Yeah.
I mean, it really depends upon what the setback is for the current lot that it's zoned as, and whatever the other aspects of the ordinance mention.
I mean, we talked about it, 700 feet back from the road, and it's still light. But did they build 700 feet back because they were required to, or just because it was convenient to?
Probably just because it was convenient to. I don't know exactly what the standards were that were in place whenever they first.
Wetland down there.
Yeah, I can't speculate for that because I don't think anyone in this room was involved with that. We'd have to look at the specific entitlement for that parcel,
Okay.
how it's zoned or any conditions that were.
So we can't arbitrarily say 700 feet back is the.
Absolutely not. That the entire frontage of their property is wet ponds.
Yeah.
It is used as a mitigation for their impervious surface, or there were other environmental reasons they stayed out of it. Yes, sir.
I understand the objectionality of seeing this from a homeowner's perspective. And I understand what we're writing, looking at is to help mitigate that situation. Which I appreciate greatly. But I'm not sure I understand what we're proposing to change for what I see here that would be different, that would mitigate the situation.
I'm showing you conditions that are currently in existence and what the effects of different setbacks result in. It is up to us to provide any guidance.
Guidance that we're suggesting, would it affect this condition that we're seeing here?
No, they are existing and they're entitled. These are future projects going forward. So the,
The project going forward. Would future project going forward, could they build the same situation?
today on that property, yes.
Now, what we're suggesting, if they're gonna build this again on this property, what differences would be there?
That's what we're discussing.
What are you proposing?
We're proposing, he's talking about Cherry Lane, not so much as Governor Scott. You're looking at a photograph from Governor Scott Parkway.
I think I understand Jerome's question.
Trying to get a vision in my mind of what are we
Yes.
changing differently from what I see?
The topics or the tools that are available are setbacks, buffers,
Right.
and what I'm gonna call secondary nuisance control, which is light, sound, and idling,
Farms and trees.
berms and trees and dimension.
And so as I'm looking at this, there were, in the packet, there was a number of suggestions for nuisance, as you call the nuisance control, lighting, parking spaces, things like that. And I'm wondering how would those controls affect what we see here if this was to be rebuilt?
Okay, I can just give you hypotheticals.
I mean, we're just here for discussion as well. So, I mean, if you want to
If
kind of,
you, okay, I think I know how to answer a dimensional question. If you change the streetscape on Amazon from 8 feet to 100 feet, then the front fascia of that wall would be about where you see 1, 2, 3, 4 cars in the third aisle of parking.
Okay.
So that results in a dimensional change of the developable area.
so basically what you're doing is
You
you're
need
just
some-
pushing it back and you're creating less light. If they were to go back 100 more feet here, they'd have less light showing in this area. As you can see, they're set back 700 feet here and doesn't have the light showing here in the right of way. That kind of makes sense. So in this area, they weren't necessarily required to have as deep of setback. So they took all that they could and built to what they were permitted to, and this is what they got outside of this area may being a little bit more comparable, and that may have to do with adding in a stormwater control measurement here in the pond that gave them a little bit of space. So, I mean, the pond has to go somewhere. I guess in this case, it just wasn't put here, so.
I guess what I'm asking for is in some of our presentations that we've gotten from our centers, they've given written wording of what they want to present. But then when they came forward with a graphic representation, here. So that's kind of what I was asking for, is like you're talking about 8-foot difference versus something else. I'm like, okay, what the heck does that look like? What do we have?
Okay, let me show you some
So
other
so your
examples.
example that you gave was really wonderful. I
Okay.
really appreciated it.
Well, you're welcome. Cameron, I guess let's go to another slide. We'll help illustrate this a little. We can go out of this folder. And that's a good one. Let's just do that. And just see what that results in.
That's the same.
All right, let's
one.
go to the next one. All right, this may help you. That's Walmart's facility. And that kind of shows you how the old airport was used, minimize grading and to take advantage of the existing topography. And that's the resulting facility. They have 600 feet off of Kimry Road, 700 feet off Senator Ralph Scott Parkway, and 400 feet off the adjoiner. Now, common to the Lytle property, I think that 750 feet is unused. Cameron, you want to go back out of that one and we'll go to some more examples.
You know,
That was built.
2013.
Take on the license, public use for the airstrip. But if they want to enlarge and triple, quadruple the size, they still be able to.
Maybe.
Again, we'd have to look at their entitlement as it was written at the time. I don't know how it was done.
Yeah, and it's really dependent upon, when we talk about conditions and conditional rezonings, but if this was a specific I-1 property that had no outside of association with conditions, and they'd have to just meet the I-1 standards of building out there. So as Mr. Huffine mentioned, there could be some underlying conditions that don't allow them to. I don't know them off the top of my head if there are. If there aren't, then it's just to the standards of the ordinance.
I want, then it is.
Yeah, if you go to Streetscape, this could be built today in front of the Old Fields Barn and the Home Place. That conforms to the city's current streetscape width of 8 feet. Landscape plantings, as you can see, are along the front fascia. And that's planted to the city's ordinance requirements.
Do you have an example what 200 feet would look like?
Yes, sir. If you go to the next slide, well, maybe not the next. Let's see what's in this folder.
Yes, sir.
You can zoom in. That's just what the street looks like. Now that the city's installed parking, no parking signs along that street, the erosion has stopped and they've been able to establish grass. There's no idling anymore in that area. So the truck traffic has been moved significantly or reduced significantly. And now it is actually occupying Amazon's property as opposed to in the public right of way. If you go, I guess let's go out of that folder, Cameron. Let me see if I can give an example of what the dimensions look like on a drawing.
So that was all through what the current ordinance will allow. So we got the land use plans, long range, owner stakeholders, can be done already, buffers, can be done
let's-
already, roads.
Let's go through four. Let's go through 4A and 4B, and I think that'll bring some dimensional information. That's a buffer. I think that's a buffer we're all, go back one, Cameron.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
I think that's a buffer we're all familiar with. That's written in the 2019 Alamance County's heavy industrial ordinance. It's just-
So that's a 16-foot buffer?
Yeah.
That'd be the 16-foot buffer that we have ordinance?
This is in the Alamance County's heavy industrial development. This is the document we patterned our February submittal after to result in a scenic streetscape that allows the function of any use that's permitted to go on without any visual change to the scenery. That's Senator Ralph Scott Parkway right in the middle of the industrial development, and it is beneficial to the residents that live behind those trees as well as the industrial users across the street.
That's a very nice looking buffer. What, is that a berm under it?
There is a berm under it, but it's not a significant height. It's about 6 feet, and there's an upward slope leaving the public right of way in that area.
And so then we're asking for the tree, I know some of the buffers designate that we have to put trees a certain height in there.
This is just simply an example of what can be done, has been done in good faith and cooperation, and
If we were.
looks good.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
That's no problem.
If we were to, I like this. It's like if I was to specify such thing ever again. How big trees are we specifying?
You could just use the city's current language at the time of planting. The trees have to be a certain height and size that's available at the wholesale market so that you don't break the backs of the developers buying the trees. You're typically doing a 2.5 inch caliper tree spaced every 15, 16 feet. That specific spacing is in the documents we submitted to the city in February 2017, which is a carbon copy of those adopted in the county's jurisdictions in 2019. And I have them on that flash drive if you want to look at it, in a plan view.
Document, it's suggesting a 16-foot tree.
Okay. So you're reading 16 from our conversation in
But it's-
December for the
it was in-
berm height.
It was in the document, so I'm like, okay.
Yes.
What does that look like?
I guess those trees are probably 20 feet or less.
Okay.
The evergreens, and they've been there for about 10 years.
20 feet, they're on top of the 6-foot buffer, berm. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's go to the next one, Cameron. Mr. Chrisman had a question about the future development going to the north. You're looking at Lytle from the north at its north fascia. Just to give you an idea of how far 700 feet really is, that's a long way, and it's a lot of usable area that they could benefit from. But given that building's enormous, I think I remember conversations with Jimmy when it was being built. We would go over there just in awe. And they still have room to grow and can do so if their entitlement so allows. If you go to the next one, Cameron. So the benefits of having vegetation and visual separation from the existing public road is evident on Kimry. You wouldn't know it, but to the left side of the photograph is Walmart and Lidl and their operations. And that's a daytime photo. And when you drive Kimry Road, you don't know that's going on.
I travel that road extensively and you don't see that.
At night, what is it like?
I'll show you a photograph of that as well. That's the back of Walmart, just for reference. So I think that might have been the 400-foot dimension. All right, let's go back out of this folder, and that's an auxiliary access that was done during construction. It was left for safety, I think. If you'll go up to, because I want to show you that same shot at night. Let's go to 0. Light at night and do Kimry at Amazon. And just skip through those. So that's the same view you saw during the day along Kimry at night with, no visible light.
You
You
wouldn't
do
the
not know
buildings
they're
were
there.
Don't see the backup lights and all that stuff.
Now the only way you would see them is if you have actually stopped and focused in one particular area, and it's very hard to see.
The reason why we're not seeing is because the trees or because of 700 feet.
It's a combination of the adequate use or appropriate use of grade, the elevation change from where you are to where the building's finished floor is, the distance horizontally from the right of way, which is the setback, and then the vegetation, which is the berm or the buffer. And I guess getting back from about 15 minutes ago, that's the tools that we as designers and as planners can use to allow or provide a harmonious relationship between a residential use and an industrial use. I think when you boil it down, that's what we're all charged with looking at tonight. How to bridge that gap or close that gap in the ordinance that allows folks at Cherry Creek to sleep.
So I'm putting this all together, and I kind of outlined what you had said and what you had commented, Mr. Brother Eric said as well. So based on the dimensions of the proposed building and or land use would dictate the setbacks and other requirements set by the ordinance. In other words, if the building was going to be 800,000 square feet, it would have to be so far back and would have certain height berms or vegetation.
That's correct.
So based on the building size, say that the developer is going to submit, then you can get an idea of what the setbacks would be in our required land use.
I would think that I one lot that's already zoned in Cherry Lane. It doesn't have any setbacks or currently. The setbacks would be the same whether it's a 200,000 square foot building or 700,000 square foot building. Same distance from the road.
Well, that's what I was trying to get a focus on, is how large this building is going to be based on the setback.
Well, that would be depending on the lot size.
Exactly.
But so it doesn't matter whether it's 100,000 square foot or 40,000 square foot building. It's still gonna have lights on the outside, still have tops.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But the berm and the mitigation of light and sound and nuisance would be the same, whatever's behind. all that.
Whatever the size of the building.
Yeah.
Okay.
But whatever size the lot will hold. course, developer and the landowner want to get more bang for the buck.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Well, that's
And
a
we want
step in
that.
the right direction. That's
Yeah.
what we're trying to do.
We need to see what. That our, October, whatever, we had the berms, the trees, the undergrowth. All that. Would that have been sufficient? To mitigate the light for here?
In what we had proposed for that developer, yes, definitely. I mean, the setbacks were increased, the berm height was substantially increased, I think it was 12 foot,
Yeah, 12 foot.
and then trees on top of that.
And just a point of clarification, I mean, when we were discussing a lot of those things, I guess at the time when we were reviewing that site plan, it was on a conditional basis as well.
Yeah,
So,
oh, I agree.
you know, establishing those conditions, I just wanted to kind of,
Well, in an overlay district. It could be the conditions of overlay district.
exactly.
Right.
So, Mr. Bishop. Let me get this straight. We're suggesting a progressive buffer zone, a set of conditions dependent upon, and the variable being causing the changes would be.
Well, no, that's one way I approached it, but
Yeah.
Mr. Crispin brought light to that in that it's based on what the property would allow. And you know, we could build as big a building as he wanted to if the land would allow it, but it's gonna have a certain amount of setback.
Are they allowed to build multi-story buildings?
The last building, whether it was a multi-story building or not, was 20 foot above grade.
Oh, yeah.
So whether it was gonna be two-story, most of them are not gonna be two-story, but it's not saying that it wouldn't have a second floor inside of it, offices or something like that. But most of these warehouses and these distribution centers are height 20 plus from the floor to the ceiling for pallets and stacking and racks, and so it's not saying you wouldn't, but most of them are gonna be open space to begin with.
I was going through the Shenandoah Valley. They're having to have this conversation in that area. One level as this is. Occasionally there would be this great big old tall thing there. 4 or 5 stories, honestly. With 10-foot stories in between. And I was wondering, in terms of future development of this area, would those be allowed?
I don't think there's a requirement
Yeah, so I got it.
other than 4-story, 5-story.
So I got it pulled up here. This is our current area height yard table requirements in our development ordinance. There's no maximum building height. So there's no requirement in regards to how high the building can be. There is a note in it that states for buildings over 50 feet in height, 1 foot of additional front yard depth is required for each 2 feet over 50 feet. So that's something that if they exceed 50 feet in height, they have to add front yard setback for every piece of, or every foot they go over it.
I was just wondering for clarity, thinking about what will be development of these areas.
Let me give you another photographic illustration of what I think it'll help you certainly visualize. I know it did me. If you'll back all the way out, Cameron, and go to can be done already buffers.
I believe this is the one we looked at the first time, when we looked at the road.
All right, go back out of that one and go can be done already.
Let's try that. Jake break.
You can go to the next sign for that. That was, okay, here, Jerome, this gives you an idea of the height of what's currently desirable for development in this area or in interstate nodes, activity nodes, heavy transportation nodes. This is an intersect development that is near the Rock Creek area at the Alamance County, Guilford County western boundary. This is a view along their western wall looking south. So you can just get an idea that there may be multi-story uses in the front with office, access to customers or folks that are there for service, as well as a large cross dock set up in the rear of this particular building for the incoming and outgoing freight. Typically coming in and sorted inside and then moved in a different packaging scenario and leaving the facility. If you go one more slide, this is where we ended up right before with the withdrawal at Christmas time. That's about a 16 to 18 foot berm height, depending upon where you are located, because the grade changes across the front of the property. So it gives you an idea of what can be accomplished with just merely a 6 foot berm and some good vegetation. And then what is excessive, but in this case was probably used as a way to waste the topsoil and provided a nice berm along I-40. So, you know, you can do it with a bunch of different things. You want to allow the developer flexibility to use as earthwork. If he has excess, allow it to be placed in berms and beneficial. If he can use it in other parts of the property as beneficial fill or for parking areas, they should be able to do that and then have a smaller berm with better vegetation. So you can accomplish it with a lot of different things. This particular facility is only set back about 125 feet off the road, but you wouldn't know it's there. I was driving by it a lot of my time last fall and winter while it was under construction. And until I was made aware they were even in town, I never knew it was there. And I worked at Red Oak. I've been working there since 2015. So in and out of that project every week. And
How much,
would not know.
how wide of a footprint does a berm like that?
So at the top of that berm, it's about 10 feet wide. So 18 at what appears to be a 2.5 or 3 to 1 slope is going to be about 65 to 75 feet wide. You're welcome. You know where the zinc used to be, the Conica plant? Okay, that's immediately adjacent to it.
Oh, height?
Mhm.
I was thinking.
Yeah, the zinc
That
is
was
really
going
tall.
on Highway 11 between Middleton and Stephen City. Periodically, there would be buildings like the zinc building. Right, okay, and look, noticing how that affected the surrounding rural neighborhood. 8 or 9 story building there along with that, and that's what I was thinking. How do we work with that?
So really in Graham, Indolor comes to mind, and that's probably not even close to what you're seeing. And that's a 45-foot building.
One thing that always, we're in our minds, we're talking about these, I want to call them low slung, but they're actually not, they're buildings, but also keeping in mind that they can come along and build.
Hey, you want to back out of that one,
Yeah.
Cameron?
For sure.
And I guess for everyone's benefit, let's go to ideas for consideration. Inside of this folder, there's the document you have in front of you, the document we submitted in February earlier this year. And then just for, I think something that'll really help everyone understand, if you'll go to setback illustrations, either one of those two, it'll really help. You'll probably have to rotate it.
Yeah.
It'll really help you see. Let's go out of that one and go to the previous one. That's really a basis for reference so that you know the data was sourced correctly. And rotate that one 90 degrees. So along Cherry Lane, you'll see these continuous green lines. Those green lines are separated every 100 feet. You see black rectangles, which are the locations of existing home sites along that section of Cherry Lane. You see that the majority of those residential sites are between 200 and 300 feet deep. And you see that the most recent submittal from Intersect on the currently zoned I-1 property respected those dimensions just voluntarily and because of their advanced knowledge from last year's work. So that gives you an idea of what a 100-foot, 200-foot, 300-foot operation setback looks like from the perspective of the historic barn and home place there at the intersection with Cherry Lane and Governor Scott Farm Road. It gives the Peddleties an idea of what their home sites look like as the Welcome property is developed adjacent to where I live. Milton's old house where Eduardo currently lives is about 150 feet off, as is Lupe's and Mary's home place. Larry's home is, all three of those homes are the same. As you go on the north side of Cherry Lane, you'll see the little cluster of residential homes that go from Mr. Moody's house closest to the Eichingers, and then all the way to the east where Justin just sold his house to Miss Robinson, I believe. So it looks like a 200, 300-foot area is what's already established, and the developers that are coming into the area seem to be respectful of that. The last two proposals I've seen as of today, they're doing that voluntarily. So I think it's something that's manageable. I think the neighborhood would be acceptable. And I do know that based on the evidence we've seen from previous photographs, that we can do a lot of work in a short dimension with light, berms, trees, and plantings.
On the old fields, is this goes through, the old field be required to have the same setback on their 700 homes?
So I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the way the law works is when you're submitted, when you make a submittal into the city for review, you are abiding by the rules or land development ordinances that are in place the day you submit. So for instance, Welcome, Intersect, KG Plaza, those all have existing zonings. They all have either a PUD in place that governs their development, or they have the straight zoning that allows them to develop. So it is not retroactive in any means. It is going forward, giving guidance to all the development interests in that area.
So conceivably, old fields could build up to the right of way.
So specific to Oldfields, they have reserved a section of the very front of the field for future improvements.
Right.
That PUD is planned unit development. That PUD is specific to the first 300 feet as commercial residential uses. So within that 300 feet, there could be a home, just like is shown there. There could be a store. That'd be up to Mr. Carlisle. I don't know. I certainly wouldn't speak for that. That may be more likely on another piece of property, but there was discussion back in 2002 and 3 when we were working on that corner of some kind of destination general store. And, we optioned that property for years until the options were no longer available. And then the economy took a drastic change.
Donkey farm be gone then, wouldn't it?
The donkey farm is gone.
It's gone. Moved it. Never mind.
The overlays that we have on 54 and 87. I understand when new things are, when the car dealership had to rebuild their space, they had to conform to the new,
That's correct. Significant effort.
the new situations. So if we put an overlay on this and things are built, which can they go with? A PUD that said you could put retail within whatever that less than 100?
So the overlay would not be retroactive if I'm correct on the way the law is written. The day that you submit your project, you play by the rules on the book at the day that you submit it.
In other words, not grandfathered back.
So
Overlay would not affect. Oh,
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm going, it's like. Going on 87, they were already,
So for Cash for Cars, that project originated in 2017. And the overlay district predates that. And the sidewalk improvements, the landscaping, the changes to that parking area all had to follow the overlay district because that was in place when they submitted their plans. One thing I want to bring up as an alternative to setbacks and buffering is a planned unit development along Cherry Lane. And there's a slide I'll show you in that same folder as an alternative solution. One of the,
Which one is it?
I'm sorry, Cameron,
No, you're fine.
HUD Arteries Model 1.
There it is. I just want to make sure.
So in March, you have to rotate that too. So in March of this year, we worked extensively with some of the larger landowners, some of the interested national developers, regional, I would say national, one national and some regional developers in trying to address all of the concerns that surfaced during last year's work with Intersect. What this drawing shows is basically a use of the southern side of Cherry Lane with a parallel, basically I'm gonna call it a parallel interceptor road that runs along the southern ends of the larger tracks that would then connect to Governor Scott Farm Road. That would alleviate a lot of the traffic on Cherry Lane. With the addition of the 94-acre Eichinger product piece that's now in consideration, I would encourage us to look at an additional parallel road. You'll see it in green and black on this drawing, just below the word sites and below the orange rectangular piece. That road extends east and west, paralleling Cherry Lane along the Mill Creek area, intersects with Governor Scott Farm Road, and then allows the industrial traffic to continue south to Senator Ralph Scott Parkway and then back on to Trollingwood Road. Additionally, there's a traffic control device near the word sites. It's a little roundabout that would allow typical automobile traffic to access Mr. Westman's property for employees, for visitors, for executives that come in off the interstate and are not familiar with the truck routes while segregating the trucks from the automobile traffic. It would allow the buildings to front Cherry Lane, respect the corridor and the visual that exists there, but it would allow for the heavy truck traffic to avoid Cherry Lane altogether. We learned a couple of months ago that DOT is now in process of reevaluating Cherry Lane. So that may be a non-issue. But at the time we were working on this in March of this year, that was not knowledge we were given. This shows the UPS facility. It shows the existing Walmart, Lidl, and Amazon. In red, it shows the Intersect property that's currently in consideration. The Crow property that's in orange, I'm not aware if they've taken title to the property yet or not, but it may be under contract. There may be folks in the room that can provide more information than I have on that, but that's another solution. You wouldn't necessarily have the large setbacks, but you could have a lot of the nuisances removed from those neighbors that live along Cherry Lane. And then finally, the first 200 or 300 feet that we've all looked at as setbacks or buffers, we could encourage that area to develop as residential. And let the residential front Cherry Lanes corridor and have the industrial uses back up to it if this parallel road idea was adopted. There are a lot of differences if you are the established homeowner and a new development is brought to your neighborhood. That is where a lot of my neighbors express concerns. It's completely different if I buy a house adjacent to an industrial park. I know going in, that's what I'm getting. And what we want to try to do as good planning is to make sure everyone's aware. And then what they're left with is manageable and is acceptable, given 24-hour operations and sometimes, and the need to sleep in your home and the other. I think that all starts with us.
I like the idea of the separate, the lower southern road.
But that's expensive. At the time that idea was conceived, it was basically rebuild Cherry Lane or build your own private street, which is a 24-foot driveway. It's all we really need to carry the truck traffic. But that 24-foot wide needs to be thick enough. The stone and asphalt has to be strong enough that it lasts longer than 2 years, as we've seen Cherry Lane come apart. So however wide the street is, it's not a significant detriment to the impervious surface that's necessary for these operations. It's simply structural. And it would, something that's has more longevity. And as it would be built, it'd be built like every other development. When we build a new neighborhood, we build streets and we dedicate them to the city. In this case, there may be extensions of private drives with cross-access agreements across properties and common area maintenance agreements that facilitate the upkeep of the street or road, depending on what you want to call it. So there's all kinds of ways to get it done. Just an idea.
Specify that be done.
I don't know if we want to go to any degree of action. I just think we want to discuss what's the best way to move this forward. I would personally like to be able to sleep.
And you got a lot of different jurisdictions involved in that. Too. So it wouldn't be something that was strictly a Graham.
If it was done, we could have multiple jurisdictions.
This would be built by private development. If we're going in and building a warehouse facility, we're going to build a long driveway to get back to the publicly maintained road. It's just whether you're going out the north or out the south. The end result's going to be very similar. We're going to build, when we build a truck route around a building, we're going to build it to last 20 years. That driveway would be the same thing. Just alternatives. You do this all day, you think of solutions and ways to make it work for everyone. Ideas.
Mr. Brown, can we hear some of your thoughts?
Thank you. Lee, appreciate that. For the record, my name's Lawson Brown, practice law with the Vernon Law Firm. I'm also employed by the city of Mebane, but I am not here on the city of Mebane's behalf. We have not been consulted about this at the city, and I am not representing the city of Mebane. Just a couple of historical things. When the county, Graham and Mebane built the utility structure out there, basically the sewer that flows to the Graham plant, all that money was fronted so that Walmart and others could come, and that's when the 1,200 acre roughly area came about for the North Carolina Commerce Park. The boundaries weren't clearly set, but the conversations were had with all the various owners as to whether they wanted to be included or not included. Some of the property owners said, no, I don't want to be included. The way philosophically an overview I've looked at it is that properties that could be served by that sewer line, which are the ones that run from Cherry Lane basically to the east down to the creek bed, and some other properties that are served by that. Those are the ones that I think the cities and the county would agree are, quote, in the Commerce Park. Well, why is that important? It's important because they share tax revenue, whether it's in Graham or whether it's in Mebane, or whether none of them have been in the county because all these industries need water and the county doesn't supply water. But all those taxes are, if it comes to Mebane, it's divided a third, a third, a third. If it comes to Graham, it's divided a third, a third, a third. So it's worked extremely well. I mean, it's been a boon for Alamance County. This is very unusual. You've got Mr. Huffine, who I've worked with before with clients, and I think he's actually done work on some of the stuff that I've done personally on the board, who lives in this geographic area and has a real keen interest in it. And I certainly understand that. Tonight, I'm here with representatives of the Welcome Group that we've already filed with the city, the extensive plan, and Mr. Huffine, we've shared everything with him so that we understand that. It's actually on the west side of Cherry Lane, and it's not part of the Commerce Park because that sewage will go to the west and will not go through this sewage system that was built for the North Carolina Commerce Park. The concept of the road is great in theory, but there are a tremendous amount of wetlands there. My experience with Welcome, and I represent other clients, industrial clients that are under confidentiality agreements that are in that area that are or have property under contract. There's so many streams in that area that it's an extremely difficult area to work with. I think the answer that y'all have is looking at the berm, the plantings, and the setbacks. And the setbacks that have been proposed here, I think are too difficult for industrial users. I want to step back just a second and say that, you know, I've drafted ordinances for municipalities. I did the continuing care retirement center ordinance with for the village of Brookwood, representing the hospital, Alamance Regional at the time. I mean, we worked for months on that. I worked integrally with the staff at the city of Burlington, Mr. Hark Rader, Mr. Lawrenson, and the engineering department. We worked extensively. We also had consultants, engineering consultants, and I think it was with John McAdams' company, but we worked for months with that, and we compared a number of ordinances to get to where we wanted to go. I applaud Chad for putting this together, but I think the ordinance you have before you is in its early conception. I mean, I hear Dean say that you looked at this 8 months ago. Well, based on being a land use attorney, I think this would require an extensive amount of work by staff and perhaps outside consultants, and certainly the engineering. I don't think, based on practical knowledge, stepping back again, the practical knowledge of the street proposed there is anything doable at all. There's just too many wetlands and creek crossings. UPS, I know the nationwide permit for Corps of Engineer work in the wetlands and across the creeks has been exhausted in that 1,200 acres. I do know that. And UPS knew that, and they had very skilled engineers, and they said, well, we've seen this before. And so, you know, they just built a huge bridge across where they wanted to go with their truck traffic. Well, most developers can't do that. Most municipalities can't do that. And if you go with an individual permit, which each one of these sites would have to cross the creeks to get across over to Senator Ralph Scott Parkway, you're looking at a minimum 12-month approval process, probably 24 months with the Corps of Engineers, tens of thousands of dollars, if not 100,000 or more in engineering fees. So I think y'all are not the political body, but I think you've got to be sensitive to what the political realities are and sensitive to the landowners out there who some of them are going to be very hamstrung with their property because of the creeks and the topographical features. I think what I'm hearing you say is that you're looking at the right things, but I would just caution you to be very thorough and move very slowly with it in terms of the consideration that it should be given. But that's my 2 cents on behalf of Welcome, and I want, that has already submitted their plans, and as Chad has indicated, their grandfather, what they've done, but there are a couple other property owners and individuals and developers out there that have serious concerns about what do you have before you. So that said, I will sit down and,
Question.
yes, sir.
What kind of buffer distance and structure are you, in your proposal, are you?
I think it has to be site specific.
For the what, for the one that, the site that you're doing?
We're doing 100 feet, 100 feet, which is what the ordinance provides for.
Sure.
And we've offered, we're having discussions with Mr. Huffine, who's immediately contiguous, so we're hoping to embellish that. I think it depends on, because of the topography of the property. When I ride up Governor Scott Farm Road and go into Old Fields, then I start going down. I'm not sure how much, I know what you can see from Cherry, but I don't know what the typical property owner on the backside of Old Fields can see that would be on any of the property that drops off very severely on the other side. And I've been doing this 47 years, so I've been doing it a long time. And when I did work for LabCorp and over in West Burlington and for their Elon facility, and you had all those bright lights, and I said, guys, and so a couple of neighbors, Ms. Hikes, who's on the board on the city council in Burlington, she and her husband were directly affected. And of course, you've got to take care of the neighbors in some fashion. So we mitigated that a great deal. But I think you're thinking about the right things, Kendall. Strength at the various points, setbacks, buffering, et cetera. So, but I would caution you to be very, very careful with it and give it the flexibility it needs for individual sites, so that you don't have a hard and fast rule, perhaps some flexibility with a combination of those three, perhaps some other things that your professionals could come up with.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Good seeing you.
Same here.
Anyone else?
Here.
State your name and address, please.
Sure. Bill O'Quinn, 2409 Beckett's Ridge Drive, with Avison Young representing the Eikingers and the Perdukes. So good to see you guys. Thanks for presenting all this. I hadn't seen it, and so certainly spent a lot of time on it. And obviously, with being under contract with a Welcome Group, they're sort of down the road, and so the ownership is, I think, looking for some clarity, just that they're going to be excluded from this because they've been pretty heavily invested in it up to this point. And so I see in the diagram here that it looks like we're inside that overlay district. And so I just want to understand, and they want to understand how that works, and if changes are made. I hear you say it's not going to be retroactive, but is that accurate? Do we need to ask any other questions? I'm just
Chairman, you want to address?
curious about the process.
So as Mr. Brown was just stating in regards to the Welcome Group property over there, that involves the Perdukes and the Eikingers
Yes.
pieces of land, they do have what is, I guess, considered to be vested rights, which is associated with the time of their submittal of their application and their site plan for review, that they are currently vested under what is stated in the current ordinance. So them moving forward, nothing's going to change if something were to happen tomorrow, per se. If the overlay were to, hypothetically, of course,
Sure.
if it were to be established tomorrow, nothing would change in that aspect. Now, when you're discussing the retroactive aspect of it. And what if they look to develop more land outside of there, develop even more property? What does that look like? I don't know if I can give you a clear answer in regards to if an overlay is established in that area, then what that would look like. So I'm not gonna speak much on it out until I get a little bit more assistance, perhaps from legal folks.
Okay.
But that's just me. So I can get, I know we've had multiple conversations with Mr. Brown and Mr. Warren in regards to the vested rights aspect of it, because this has been in discussion for, as we talked about, since February of this, earlier this year. So they've been submitting their site plans, the vested aspects there. But when it comes to establishing the overlay and what that does to the property after it's built and constructed, I don't have a clear answer for you at the time, but I'd be more than happy to take your name and email down and attach you and the Perdukes and the Eikingers in the email and give you a little bit more information. But that's about all I can offer right now. I apologize.
No, that's fine. No, that's plenty. I appreciate it.
Mhm.
That's just hearing y'all talk and then certainly understanding, I guess who here owns property over on Cherry Lane? I know, so there are two of you, so 40%. So obviously you have a vested interest in that and I understand that. So I know we want to be good neighbors as well. So I just appreciate y'all going through the exercise and look forward to that additional comments.
Yes, sir. Of course.
Thank you.
Cameron, I think me and you and Aaron has had some discussion prior to this document coming out about the area out there, overlay versus potential, just a stricter ordinances that we have already in place out there, such as requiring larger setbacks from property lines and berms and landscaping we've talked about. And, of course, I don't know if the overlay is the best option or if tweaking what we already have in place is just as good. But I do want to spend some time and put some thought in this and see what's going to be the best solution. I do know that council did approve the money that you was talking about earlier for
The law.
2035 long range plan.
So we actually signed the document of intent, I believe it is, to start work in November. I believe Aaron mentioned the first public meeting was in November for that to start getting kicked off. So that's coming sooner rather than expected. So that's something that's in the pipeline that you all will be probably heavily involved in and will heavily advertise to members of the public as well. That this is something we are also working on. So that's kind of all the updates I have in regards to that. We've been working with Mr. Day with, believe is it with the COG that we're working with? I can't quite remember. So
Public meeting that was held, was that just for that the plan was going to be done, or was that to start getting ideas from?
yeah, so I believe it's to
Yeah,
start getting
step
those ideas. I don't know exactly what the scope of the meeting will be in November, if it will just be defining the scope of the project moving forward, but I know that they are planning on having something in November. I believe that's what Aaron said to me, so. Do not think so. We literally just signed the letter of intent like 1 or 2 days ago, so I just know that's the nearest timeline that I have.
Cameron, I'm gonna put you on the spot
Oh,
and
Let's hear it. I mean,
I'm sure you can handle it.
let's hope.
As a perspective, as a planner,
Yes, sir.
looking at these parcels and looking at what we're talking about potentially, whether it's overlay or what. Give us some ideas of what staff would be looking at or considering. That if it went one way or another, they would rather see potentially us take a harder look at.
Yeah, for sure. I will start off by saying a lot of my work here that I view it as a planner is quite subjective. And that's being subjected to what's inside the ordinance and subjected to what's required of me. So I base my work off of what is provided to me from city council, managerial, you folks as well. So whatever they would like to make changes is what I work on. I necessarily don't feel it's right for me to have my own kind of opinion in this situation, as I'm just a worker of the city, not necessarily a representative that sits on the city council or planning board. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. even not being a managerial leader in this municipality here as well. I'll just kind of sit it at that. I'll plead my ignorance at least.
Then I certainly would think that I would like to request at the next meeting that we have someone who can make those decisions, such as maybe Aaron, if he would attend and,
Mhm.
I want to look at this at every angle.
Yeah.
And it's not something that's got to happen today, but I don't want to be Stonewall either.
Yeah, no,
So-
I completely understand that. I mean, as noted in the past, a lot of these changes that we all saw, in the past year and a half in regards to text amendments and things along those lines were all pushed forward by staff. Stuff that staff wanted to change inside of the city. And I don't think that was recepted quite too well by, multiple people. And I think with that caused city council to retract kind of that ability and say, if we want to make changes, city council wants to be the ones that drive that. And so I don't even think, even if I myself or Aaron sat here and had an opinion on it, if that would be something that city council would want to do. And so I think the ultimate decider in this case is this something city council would even want to look forward to put staff's opinions and insight into? And so, I'm not trying to stonewall you in that aspect, but there's a higher power even above me and assistant city manager and manager that kind of forces these moves and trickles down into the staff level. So that's just, I'm not trying to be hard to work with here, but I don't see myself making any statements or public opinions in regards to it, because as I mentioned, a lot of my work here is subjective to what is inside of the ordinance, which derives from members of the city council and the planning board.
And if I recall during the city council meeting, Councilman Chin was going to take this under his belt and kind of pursue something in that aspect in that area to drive,
Mhm.
whether staff had, so you have not received anything. from
I
Councilman Chin?
was not aware that Mr. Chin was doing that either, and that could just be for me not attending city council meetings. But it could be a directive from them that it's on their next agenda to discuss it. And if there's something that they want to do moving forward, to task us to write it up, or, I mean, the other option is to just come back and Mr. Huffine, you present it on behalf of yourself and the folks over there, and set the public hearing for the next planning board meeting and the public hearing for the council meeting. But I don't think it's something that staff can necessarily take and run with right now because it hasn't been directed down upon us.
Sounds like a lot of passing the buck there.
And it
Uh,
is, I mean, that's how government works. I mean, as you all have kind of seen and seen how it's worked, as well as when staff is the one that are making all the changes, a lot of things that, come through that may not be, receptive by a lot of members of the city. And I think that was due noted. And that was then what established the policy of, if we want to see change, we'll tell you to change. And that's the stance that I have to have. If they ask me to provide opinion and do that and further working with things along these lines, I'd be more than happy to.
All right, I guess I'll come to the next council member and talk to council. I just think that there's an opportunity here to shape this corridor
Mhm.
just a little better than what it is today, that coincides with industrial and residential living there together.
Yes, sir. And a lot of that,
And-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And there's a lot of opportunity for us to work and listen to some of these developers today to form some kind of good, receptive opportunity with the city and developers, that they know what their developers, their clients are looking for.
Mhm.
And we as the city know what the residential community there is looking for.
Yes, sir.
And let's see if we can come to something where we could do something, make some type of suggestions to council and let council chew on it for a while
Yes, sir.
and see if they like it or not. I don't know if overlay district is the best. It may be, it may not be. But there certainly is some opportunities there to improve what we
Mhm.
have.
And a lot of that stuff moving forward will kind of be outlined in the updated comp plan. But of course, that's also not something that happens overnight. You know, these public meetings where we're talking about meeting with stakeholders, meeting with developers, meeting with residential citizens. I mean, especially for those, I mean, Cherry Lane is the only one that's being affected by development. I mean, as y'all saw, you know, the Hanford Road stuff as well. You had multiple people in here concerned about, you know, specific areas of traffic. So, you know, there are different areas inside the city of Graham that need to be hit. And somebody made a notion earlier about, you know, are we going to have an overlay district on whatever Moore Street in the future or Hanford Road in the future, you know? So I think that's what these updated comp plans, and that has been kind of our understanding, or my understanding is our purview of this moving forward has been, let's take a look at it under the comp plan that we put the money towards. So, and I believe that would come down from admin as well.
Chairman, if I may, help answer your question you asked, Cameron. Cameron, if you'll back out of this slide. And this will be a refresher for some of us. Ideas for consideration. Let's see if that's in there. All right, you'll back up just a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Reports of interest. Planning staff, landscape, and board members. So in a letter written February 2022 on behalf of the citizens of Old Fields, if you'll go to the last paragraph of that letter, and this is in the city's records already. I think this letter, in addition to the 14 independent and anonymous planners, landscape architects, engineers, attorneys, and municipal managers that we interviewed during the process back in November, and then it agrees kind of with what Mr. Brown and what we've all kind of landed on. You know, we have a very difficult intensity change from residential to industrial use. And you have buffers, you have setbacks, and you have landscaping, and that's really the tools that you have to work with. And I think that to answer the chairman's question, and I think we'll all agree, as did these other 14 professionals, those are the tools we have to work with, and we need to work with them quickly so that we give direction to the future development. We do know that those ideas can be accommodated, as we've seen in the Intersect development submittal recently, and in the Welcome development submittal recently, who have gone above and beyond the current city ordinances in order to accommodate the ideas and needs of the citizens. And, you know, those developers certainly didn't have to do that. They were zoned by right for actions that were taken prior to us having an opportunity to provide input. Just going forward, we'll be able to provide some real clarity, some setback guidance, and something that's manageable, especially as the new residents begin to move in into Cherry Creek and they don't realize what's about to be at their back door. We don't want that to happen again. We want to close that gap, especially in the Graham's land use ordinance.
Eric, anything? Well, I guess, if there's nothing else to be said tonight, if Cameron, if you don't have anything else said tonight, do you want it back on, next month? Talk about it again?
So bring it back next month, and is this something, okay, so is this something you all are looking to kind of push forward as we set a public hearing for it next month, and then, or do you want to talk about it again next month? No public hearing or anything like that?
Me personally don't think that we're at the stage for any type of public hearing at the
Yes,
present.
sir.
It's more just a discussion, informal, in a open setting here to see where we can send the ship in the direction.
Mhm.
Whether it's any improvements need to be done, which we all agree that we think there's improvements that need to be done, but we just want to make sure we make the best move.
Yes, sir. I understand. And I was gonna note that as well. I don't know if, I mean, I believe it's something that we could add into their agenda item for discussion in regards to what directive that they want to take with this. You know, if this is something that they want to task the planning board and city staff to work on, then that is what we'll do. But until I get that notion from them and it trickles down, I haven't been, I guess, established to, look over it or make any edits or things along those lines. So that's kind of where I'm at in that situation. So I just need that trickle down effect.
Anything further?
Just a thought, take in consideration, Mr. Brown said, to move precisely, but very careful.
Yes, sir.
And then, once we come to some kind of consensus here, then we could have something that we could even present to the board for consideration that they may take and move forward with it. And then you would have some trickle down from there. But we're not exactly sure exactly where we want to be just yet.
Yes, sir. I understand that. And I guess that's the thing is, city council probably doesn't know where they want to be at either. I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but I mean, they saw it the first time it came through and I don't know what their decision was in that aspect. So, if they understand that, we're talking about condensing it down, whether it be through overlay or however they may see fit, then that's something we all can work on. So. And we could establish work sessions outside of, sitting on areas like this, being around a desk, brainstorming and advertise it to the public if anybody would like to come to a work session. And then kind of bring back into this open public setting where, you all are up here. So, I mean, there's definitely time we could put towards it. It's just making sure we don't exasperate that time prior to if it's not going to be receptive by the members of the city council. That's kind of where I fall.
Well, the only thing I was going to say is I can't speak for anybody on the council. But it may be that they don't know the effect of what's going on in that area because they're not out there. They don't see it. So a lot of that needs to be brought to light for them to understand it.
Now, I'll agree with Mr. Benesh. If you'll recall that the withdrawal occurred at planning and the presentations never made it to city council. So except for 2 council members that visited the site individually during those hearings at planning, council of the general public outside of the public hearing at planning has no idea what's going on out there. All I know is what my neighbors asked me to do. And the Lord has equipped me with the ability to do that. He's given me expertise in a wide variety of items, including land planning, which just happens to be falling right in our laps. And Mr. Benesh is exactly right. No one during December lived out there with trucks every 3 minutes. Fortunately, that's been alleviated for the time being. So we need to consider all of those things. And quite frankly, it's good to have one of the council members in the chamber tonight to hear this. We looked extensively at the parallel interceptor road, avoiding the wetlands that Mr. Brown alluded to. We've developed a plan that avoids almost all of those wetlands entirely, but no one has seen that plan. And until it's given light, until we're given an audience, you only know what you know.
Yes, sir.
So until it's brought to your attention, we're not going to get any traction as evidence since February. So I'm grateful that, and my neighbors are, the multiple phone calls that I've gotten this week reassure me that they're listening or watching at home or looking for some direction so that when they're ready to develop, they can have their own family meetings and know what they're going to do with their properties. They just need some direction, and I'm grateful to the planning board for giving us opportunity to talk about it tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Anything further concerning this for tonight?
I have nothing else.
All right. Any non-agenda business anyone wants to talk about tonight? No, from the board right here first. Anything that's not on the agenda that you want to talk about? And Cameron, have you got anything that's a non-agenda item you wanna?
No, sir. Outside of what I was discussing earlier in regards to the signature of intent for the new comp plan. And that's starting up relatively soon. So that's about all I have in that aspect.
Right, and the final order of business, anyone in the public would like to talk about anything that's non-agenda tonight? Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to be adjourned.
I second that.
All in favor? Any opposed?